He told the maid to dance to mock her. But when she started, she stopped the party with a single step. The ballroom of the majestic hotel shimmered in gold, silver, and crystal. French chandeliers hung like crowns of light over the guests, who danced, toasted, and indulged as if the party had been staged solely for their pleasure. And it had. Robert Harris, a construction magnate, was celebrating his 50th birthday with the kind of excess only the very rich and very vain could sustain. Bespoke suit, smile sculpted by a plastic surgeon, champagne flute in hand, Robert moved through the room like a king in his empire. In his shadow, Emily, 30 years younger, a model, influencer, and his newly announced fiancé. Tall, elegant, confident, as used to the spotlight as he was. "My friends!" Robert raised his voice and his glass, commanding the attention of everyone in the center of the room. "Nothing gives me greater pleasure than sharing this evening with you. And, of course, one of my greatest passions, dance, or rather, the tango." The crowd cleared a space around the floor. A live orchestra tuned their instruments. Robert extended his hand to Emily, who was already adjusting her heels, confident. They had rehearsed for weeks. The dance was more about spectacle than art, and both of them knew it. The music began, steady beats, seductive cadence. They glided across the floor, mixing rehearsed steps with calculated glances. Applause echoed. Phones were raised to capture the moment. Robert smiled with the corner of his mouth, certain he commanded not just the dance floor, but every gaze in the room, until something unsettled him. In the corner, near the buffet, someone was watching too intently for it to be mere curiosity. It was one of the cleaning staff, a woman in her 40s, plain uniform, hair tied back, an expression hard to read. Robert couldn't resist. When the music ended, he grabbed the MC's microphone, still breathless from the dance. "So, folks, what did you think?" The crowd applauded. He grinned. "Now here's the thing. While we were dancing, I noticed a very focused spectator in the back, our hardworking cleaning staff. Who knows, maybe she wants to try a step or two. After all, tango isn't for just anyone. Or is it?" Laughter rippled through the room, some uneasy, others complicit. Emily tried to interrupt with a whisper, but Robert was intoxicated by his own provocation. The woman didn't answer immediately. She just looked at him, steady without lowering her head. One of the waiters, who seemed to know her, whispered in her ear. Another began clapping in encouragement. The air thickened with tension. A second chair was pulled out for the orchestra. The conductor looked at her, waiting. Then she walked to the center of the room, silent, steady steps, like someone crossing a minefield without fear. When she arrived, she looked straight at Robert. "I don't need your microphone, just the music." A murmur spread. The conductor nodded and the bandoneon cried the first chords. This time it was a more classic tango, raw and visceral. The woman, Sophia, as her badge revealed, closed her eyes. A dancer from the support crew stepped forward to join her, and the impossible happened. Sophia danced as if it were breathing. Her movements were clean, yet overflowing with emotion. Each step carved a story into the floor. Each turn seemed to command the room's very breath. There was no choreography, only truth. The ballroom fell silent, mesmerized. Robert, standing beside Emily, couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something familiar in that posture, that precision, that gaze lost in time. Emily tried to keep her smile, but insecurity had already dulled the shine in her eyes. When the music ended, there was a second of absolute silence. Then, applause. Loud, genuine applause. A few guests shouted, "Bravo!" Others still struggled to grasp what they had just witnessed. Sophia acknowledged them with a slight nod and, without waiting for any reaction from Robert, returned to her place among the staff. Emily yanked her hand free from Robert's and stormed off the floor without a word. Robert stood frozen, staring at the empty space where Sophia had been. Pride had been replaced by something else, an echo from the past, a troubling premonition. The party went on, but it never regained its shine. Dinner came out lukewarm, conversations dwindled. Everyone was talking about the cleaning woman who danced like a goddess. And Robert, between sips of whiskey and long silences, felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years: doubt. That night, he dreamed of an old dance studio, a young teacher with unflinching eyes, and a forgotten phrase: "Tango isn't technique, it's a scar." Robert didn't sleep. The image of that woman in the ballroom, the cleaning lady, Sophia, replayed in his mind like a visual echo. It wasn't just the dance, it was her posture, her fluidity, the eyes that seemed to dance on their own. It was like watching a ghost perform under modern spotlights. By dawn, locked in his office with an open bottle of wine still on the desk, Robert pulled an old photo album from a high shelf. Most of the pictures were of parties, graduations, dinners, all carefully staged. But one, hidden between two stuck pages, revealed something different. Him, 18 years old, stiff posture, uncomfortable expression, standing beside a young woman with a calm smile and eyes that seemed to know more than they should. Sophia Green, the tango teacher his mother had hired to polish him. Robert had hated the lessons at first, but slowly, she had won him over, not just with the dance, with her firmness, with the way the world seemed to fall silent whenever she began to move. And then, one day, she simply vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. His mother had said there were personal problems and that it wasn't proper to discuss it. Now, 22 years later, that same feeling had returned. But this time, he wouldn't leave the questions unanswered. 2 hours later, Robert had already mobilized his security team to dig into the records of the outsourced cleaning company. The woman listed as Sophia Morgan had been on staff for 5 months. Modest address, spotless record, no history in dance schools or any kind of artistic background. Too spotless. Robert studied the digital file on his tablet with suspicion. So ordinary it was suspicious. And the name, Morgan. Generic, convenient. A disguise. That same afternoon, he had her summoned to his office. Sophia walked in silently. She wore the company uniform, hair tied back, badge visible on her chest. Upright posture. Unafraid but not friendly either. It was obvious she knew why she had been called. "Sit down." Robert motioned to the chair in front of his desk. She didn't move. "I'd rather stand." He rested his elbows on the desk, fingers interlaced beneath his chin. "Who are you?" "Sophia, as it says on my badge." "I'm not asking for your name now. I'm asking for the truth. Who are you?" She raised an eyebrow but showed no surprise. She only said, "You're confusing me with someone else." "That's what worries me, because I never forget a look or a posture. And certainly not a dance." Robert stood, slowly circled the desk, and stopped just a few steps from her. "You're a professional. What you did last night wasn't luck or a hobby, and I've seen it before." Sophia held his gaze. No words. You're Professor Sophia Green, aren't you?" The silence lasted half a beat longer than it should. Long enough for Robert to recognize the truth before the answer came. "I'm a member of the cleaning staff, Mr. Harris, and if my presence here bothers you, you can ask my supervisor to replace me." She turned to leave, but he was quicker. "Why did you disappear? Who pulled you away?" Sophia stopped with her hand on the doorknob. "I didn't disappear, Robert. The world decided I should vanish, and then she left. The door left ajar behind her." Robert stood frozen, the air in the room suddenly thinner. That night, he sat before his mother like a confused child. Donna Margaret, always impeccable, wore a blue silk robe while sipping chamomile tea on the terrace. When she saw him arrive with such a serious expression, she knew this wasn't just any visit. "Mother, tell me something. Do you remember Professor Sophia Green?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at her tea, then into the dark night before her. When she finally spoke, it was a whisper. Why that question now? Because she's here, I think. She works as a cleaner for one of the contractors. She danced at the party last night. And Mother, it was her. I know it was. Margaret set the teacup down carefully. Her hand trembled slightly. This can't be. She vanished. She left. She was removed. She left no trace. But you know why. Robert leaned forward. You always knew, and you never told me. Margaret closed her eyes as if trying to push away a memory she had long wanted to bury. Your father said it was for the best, that there were issues, improper things. I trusted him. Issues? Robert laughed bitterly. He hated the idea of me learning to dance, said it was something for weak Argentinians. But you insisted. Because she was brilliant, Margaret's voice cracked. An artist, a woman of integrity. Then why did he take her away? Why did she vanish overnight? Robert pressed. Dona Margaret fell silent, but the pallor in her face and the silence that followed were the clearest confirmation Robert could have received. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of something far too big beginning to rise from the past. And this time, he would not rest until he uncovered the truth. The morning dawned cloudy, as if the sky were mirroring the turmoil inside Robert Harris. He spent the morning pacing back and forth in his office, replaying every detail of those past tango lessons, every hushed conversation between his parents, every poorly explained silence. At 11 on the dot, Dona Margaret entered with measured steps. She held something small in her closed hand, wrapped in an old handkerchief. Robert looked up immediately. You found it? She nodded without a word and slowly unfolded the cloth. Resting in the center of her palm was an oval silver locket, antique, with hand-engraved floral details. When she opened it, 2 small, faded photos were revealed. On one side, a young Sophia smiling gently. On the other, an engraved phrase, "Where there is dance, there is truth." Robert handled the locket carefully, as if holding a shard of ancient glass. It belonged to her, Margaret murmured. I kept it when everything fell apart. I thought that one day, well, that she might come back. I never imagined it would be like this. Robert clenched the locket in his fingers. This will make her speak. 2 hours later, Sophia entered the same office where she had refused to sit just days before. This time, Robert waited seated, the locket plainly visible on the desk. She stopped when she saw it. For a moment, her eyes faltered. Too slight for an untrained observer, but enough for Robert to be certain the past had just walked into the room with her. Where did you find this? Her voice was low but steady. Robert didn't answer. He pushed the locket toward her. It was yours, wasn't it? Sophia remained standing, her gaze fixed on the object as if time had stopped there. She didn't touch it. She inhaled deeply, and when she spoke, every syllable carried an old weight. It was my grandmother's. I got it when I was 17. I carried it with me everywhere I danced. And you left it behind. I didn't leave it. It was taken from me. Robert leaned back in his chair, staring at her without looking away. Stop telling me I'm crazy, Sophia. I know who you are. I just want to know why you lied. Silence. Because it was safer, she finally said. For me, for you, for everyone. Safer how? Because 22 years ago, your family destroyed me. The words cut through the room. Robert took a few seconds to respond. When he did, anger and disbelief mixed in his voice. What? I was accused of theft. They said I seduced students. They spread lies, twisted gestures and words. One day I was teaching. The next, my name was in the papers like I was a criminal. Robert rubbed his face hard, trying to make sense of it. That makes no sense. Why? You were a teacher, that's it. Sophia smiled, but it was bitter. You know it's never just that. I was young from a humble background, and I got close to a wealthy, promising student, the son of one of the most powerful men in town. Robert froze. Me? She nodded slightly. It wasn't a romance. There was nothing improper, but there was affection, trust, mutual admiration, enough for your father to be bothered. My father? He called me in for a talk at the school office, said I was confusing his family, that I should step away. I told him there was nothing wrong. He smiled. 2 days later, I was reported. Robert stood motionless for long seconds. He would never, he began, then stopped. He remembered his father's tone whenever he saw him practicing, the acidic comments, the contempt thinly veiled as sarcasm. He would never admit it, Sophia finished, because he didn't need to. One phone call was enough, a rumor, a complaint without proof, and I was erased. Robert rose and walked to the window without looking back at her. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. That was the plan. Erase me, bury me, make me disappear. She crossed to the desk and picked up the locket with tenderness. She held it like someone finding a piece of their own body. I ran. I changed my name. I worked whatever jobs I could find. For a while, I hated dance, but I never truly abandoned it. It's like breathing. When I saw the ad for the cleaning job at your building, I almost didn't apply, but maybe I wanted to understand. Maybe I wanted to see who you had become. Robert turned to her, his expression heavy. And what did you find? That you inherited more of your father than you'd like to admit. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, as if the walls had absorbed all the truths that had never been spoken. Sophia let out a long sigh and placed the locket on the desk. I don't want pity, Robert. I just want my story back. When she left the room, Robert sat down slowly. He picked up the locket, turned it over in his hands, and read the sentence inside as if reading a verdict. Where there is dance, there is truth. And now, there was no escaping his own. The locket was still on the desk. Robert hadn't touched it in hours, yet he couldn't get it out of his mind. The phrase engraved inside seemed to echo through every corner of the house now. Where there is dance, there is truth. It was late afternoon when Donna Margaret entered the office, summoned by a short message. I need to know what happened with Sophia. She came in without ceremony. Her face was tired yet dignified. She looked paler than usual. The silence she carried felt heavier than time itself. Robert rose slowly. I already know who she is. Margaret nodded, unsurprised. She confirmed it and said you knew, from the very beginning. The mother stood before him as if bracing herself for a sentence. I knew. Not from the start. But I found out soon after the accusation. Too late. Robert closed his eyes, took a deep breath, trying to hold himself together. And you did nothing? Margaret bit her lower lip before answering. Her voice came out more fragile than Robert remembered. I tried. But Charles, the name of her late husband still weighed heavily on her tongue. He had already pulled the strings. With the press, with the other parents, with the school board. Robert paced the room. He destroyed a woman's life. Why? Donna Margaret hesitated. Finally, she said, because of you. Robert stopped. What do you mean? Because he saw something you didn't see yet. You looked at Sophia with admiration, with wonder. It wasn't childish infatuation. It was something deeper. You were happy in her classes. You smiled. You danced. And it made him furious. That makes no sense. He didn't even care about dance. He cared about control. She stepped closer. Your father couldn't stand the thought of you being shaped by someone other than him, someone outside our world. He said she was making you soft, distracting you from what mattered, and above all, that she was crossing the line. Robert laughed bitterly, the sound sharp, almost angry. So what did he do? Invented she was a thief? That she came on to her students? Margaret nodded. He called 2 influential businessmen, fathers of other students, and told them she was a risk to their families' reputations. They forged a complaint built on rumors, falsified documents, created a dossier. Within a week, she had been dismissed, defamed, erased. Robert stepped back as though needing air. And you? You just watched? I was a coward. Her voice trembled. I tried to argue, said it was unfair. He threatened me, said if I defended Sophia, he'd drag my name into the scandal along with hers. I stayed silent, and I've regretted it ever since. Robert stared at his mother for a long time. For the first time, she didn't look like a grand lady of high society. She looked like an old woman, worn down by years of omission. I became just like him, Robert said at last. Arrogant, controlling. I humiliated her in front of everyone out of pure ego. Margaret tried to touch his arm, but he pulled away. When I saw her dance, I felt something familiar. Now I understand what it was. It was what I felt when I danced with her in that studio, that sense of freedom, of being someone better than I was. Margaret stepped closer, her eyes glistening. Robert, you can still do something right. He shook his head, bitter. Not with charity. She made that clear. She doesn't want pity. She wants justice. Across the city, Sophia sat on a park bench, watching children play. She held the locket in her hand, closed, clutching it as if it were both a talisman and a weapon. Robert appeared without warning, sat beside her, silent for a while. My mother told me everything. Sophia didn't turn, but stopped squeezing the locket. So now you know? I know my father destroyed your life out of fear of losing control. I know you had to disappear to survive. And I know I humiliated you without knowing the truth. She sighed. You knew something, Robert. Maybe not clearly, but something inside you recognized me, and still, you chose to mock. He nodded, defenseless. I was the man my father wanted me to be. I inherited his name, his company, and his flaws. But I don't want to die as him. Sophia looked at him for the first time. And what do you want? To make it right. Not with flowers, not with money. I want you to tell me what justice looks like, not what eases my guilt, what restores your story. She held his gaze, eyes hard but softer than before. Justice isn't an apology at dinner. It isn't announcing donations to soothe a conscience. Justice is giving back what was taken, the name, the voice, the space. Then tell me how. Robert leaned forward. I'll do it. Sophia hesitated. For a moment, Robert thought she might refuse. But then she said, we start with truth, then space, and finally opportunity. But only if it's on equal terms. Robert nodded. Equal terms? She opened the locket, looked at the words inside, and said, then let the dance bring the truth. And Robert knew, in that instant, that his life was about to change forever. Robert parked his car 2 blocks away from his destination. The driver had insisted on dropping him at the door, but he refused. He wanted to see with his own eyes, to feel the ground, to breathe the same air. The neighborhood was cramped, alive, full of movement. Cracked streets contrasted with the colorful, improvised facades of the houses. Children ran through alleys, street vendors shouted their offers, and a capoeira circle spun on a corner of broken cement. Robert had never been there before. And if he had, he would likely have stayed inside a car with tinted windows, speeding away as fast as possible. But now he walked slowly, feeling almost like an intruder. Almost small. A young man in a cap recognized him. "You're the guy from the paper, right? The millionaire's party?" Robert only nodded. He didn't know what to say. "Looking for the teacher? She's over there, in the warehouse." The warehouse. An old building, graffiti-covered walls, rusted gate. From a distance, he heard the music. Tango. Soft, yet steady. Familiar. He pushed the gate open slowly and stopped. Inside, about 20 children and teenagers danced in pairs on worn cement flooring. No mirrors, no air conditioning, no stage. But there was energy, commitment, something Robert hadn't seen in a long time. Truth. In the center, guiding every step, was Sophia. In simple clothes, hair tied in a loose bun, eyes sharp, voice firm. Every instruction was precise, every word of praise genuine. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, she hesitated for a brief moment. Then she resumed the class without a word. Robert waited until the end. He sat on a plastic chair pushed against the wall and watched. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. He felt like a student. "How long has this place been running?" he asked when class ended. Sophia wiped her face with a small towel. There was sweat on her forehead, but no sign of fatigue in her eyes. 3 years. It started with 5 kids and an old radio. Now there are nearly 40, split into 3 groups. And the space? Provided by the community, but constantly under threat of eviction. The owner wants to sell. The city pretends not to see. Robert looked around. The roof leaked. One of the fans squeaked with every turn. But there was something more solid here than concrete. Purpose. He drew a deep breath. "I want to build a real center, with proper flooring, professional sound, classrooms, meals for the kids. I want to invest in this." Sophia looked at him, suspicious. "Charity? Justice." She crossed her arms. "With your name on the front?" "With ours, as partners. I'll bring the structure. You, the soul. And the catch? None. This isn't a business investment. It's reparation." Sophia walked to one of the cracked mirrors leaning against the wall. "And why now?" "Because seeing you here showed me what the world lost when they tried to erase you. And it showed me who I could have been, had I not followed the path my father laid out for me." She stared at him for a while, long enough for the silence to become almost uncomfortable. "I'll accept," she said at last. "But with conditions." "What conditions?" "Full transparency, open books, shared management, no decisions without my approval." Robert nodded. "Done. And one more thing, no using this as a showcase, no interviews, no publicity, no marketing campaign with my face. No favors." "Exactly. No favors. Partnership." Robert extended his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. It was the first time they had touched since the dance. On the other side of the city, Emily was watching a video on repeat on her phone, Sophia dancing at the party. The clip had gone viral online, with captions calling the unknown woman the goddess of Tango and the woman who silenced the rich. Emily slammed the phone onto the table. "This won't stand." She had already lost contracts with 2 brands since the party. The humiliation scandal, as columnists had labeled it, had tarnished her image of elegance and power. And now seeing Robert vanish from headlines, entangled with an ex-cleaner, was more than she could bear. She grabbed her laptop and began to search. Name, Sophia Morgan. Few results. She tried variations. Sophia Green, Tango, Scandal, Teacher. An old article, 22 years old, appeared. Headline, Dance teacher removed for improper conduct with students. Emily smiled. Found you, darling. She knew exactly what to do. Reputations are fragile, and though wounded, she still knew how to wield the media like a sharp blade. Meanwhile, Robert drove home, eyes fixed on his phone. He had already called lawyers, architects, accountants. The project would begin that week. It would be the first concrete step of his new life. But he had no idea what Emily was about to unleash, and how the past, even buried, always finds a way back. Robert Harris had never stepped into his father's old office since the funeral. The place had remained untouched for years, preserved like a mausoleum of power and silence. Shelves lined with leather-bound books, oil paintings on the walls, the woody scent of an outdated masculinity. Everything seemed to carry an implicit warning. Only those who obey may enter here. But Robert no longer wanted to obey. At the back of the room, behind a revolving bookcase that revealed itself only with a push on a fake encyclopedia volume, there was a safe embedded in the wall. He vaguely remembered seeing it once as a teenager, the night he had sneaked into the office and been thrown out with harsh shouts from his father. Now, with the help of a trusted locksmith and company documents, Robert opened the safe for the first time. Inside were folders, sealed envelopes, cassette tapes, and old pen drives. Some documents were yellowed with age. Others bore the crest of Harris & Sons Construction on their letterhead. Robert began to comb through them one by one with the precision of a surgeon searching for a buried tumor. The first folder contained copies of fabricated complaints. The second, correspondence with school directors and lawyers. In one, a powerful businessman, now a federal congressman, thanked Charles Harris for discreetly resolving the issue with the troublesome teacher. There was more. An audio recording dated August 2003 captured a meeting between Charles, two businessmen, and a journalist. His father's deep voice rang clear. "She has to disappear. She's charismatic, talented. She'll pull my son away from what he needs to be. If we can't stop her talent, we'll stop her with scandal." Robert stopped the playback. His heart pounded as if trying to tear through his chest. His face burned with shame and rage. There it was, the proof, the truth. Sophia had been hunted, slandered, and silenced out of pure fear, the fear of a weak man before the strength of a free woman. That same night, Robert called an independent journalist, someone he had met during a social campaign some time ago, Nicole Parker, known for exposing the dirty dealings of the powerful and never bowing to threats. He didn't mince words. "I have documents, recordings, and contracts proving the persecution of an innocent teacher. And more. They reveal a corruption scheme involving businessmen, politicians, and media outlets." "And you're willing to open this up?" "I'm willing to tear down whatever it takes, including my father's name." Nicole and her team analyzed the documents for 3 days. In record time, they checked sources, cross-referenced data, restored recordings, and prepared a full report. The Sophia Dossier: How the Elite Destroyed a Life to Maintain Control. When the story was published on Sunday night, the country shook. Social media exploded. The name Sophia Green trended for 48 hours straight. Old videos of her dancing resurfaced and went viral, accompanied by outraged and emotional comments. The hashtag Justice for Sophia flooded the internet. The article included excerpts of recordings, photos of the documents, and testimonies from former students confirming her integrity. The most impactful was Robert's own words, captured on video. "I was part of the system that destroyed this woman, not by direct action, but through omission, ignorance, and vanity. Today, I use the name I inherited not to protect the guilty, but to repair what can still be repaired." The reaction was immediate. TV programs, radio shows, news portals, even international papers covered the case. Sophia was approached for interviews. She declined them all. She said her focus was the cultural center and the children, and in that silence she grew even stronger. Meanwhile, across the city, Emily screamed into the phone. "What do you mean the contract was suspended? I'm the victim here." Her manager tried to explain that her attempt to expose Sophia had backfired, that screenshots of Emily's online searches about the teacher's past had leaked, that audio recordings of her mocking people from the slums had gone viral, that brands were cutting ties. The media now called Emily the resentful ex-fiancée and the symbol of toxic elitism. The video of her laughing at the party while Robert humiliated Sophia resurfaced and was used as an example of social arrogance. Emily, who had built her career on image, watched that image collapse in real time. Within weeks, she lost contracts, followers, relevance. Alone in the luxury apartment that now felt far too large, she stared at herself in the mirror, and for the first time, saw nothing worth admiring. The next night, Robert went to Sophia's warehouse. He found her teaching a group of teenage girls the choreography of a modern tango. They were radiant, lighthearted, as if the news of her vindication had arrived like a breath of oxygen. When Sophia saw him, she stopped the music and walked over. "I saw the video. I read everything. It was the least I could do." She nodded. No easy smiles. "And now?" Robert looked into her eyes. "Now the world knows, but our work has only just begun." Sophia glanced at the group of laughing girls behind her. "Yes, now we can dance without fear." And for the first time, Robert understood the weight of the phrase engraved in that locket. The truth had danced, and nothing would silence it again. The old warehouse was now a memory. In its place rose a modern, airy building full of natural light with wide windows and pale wooden floors. The new Sophia Green Cultural Center didn't look like an act of charity. It looked like a home for forgotten talent, a house for the future. The inauguration brought together people from all walks of life: community residents, journalists, artists, teachers, former students, and children, many children. Sophia refused any kind of formal ceremony, but agreed that the first to step on stage should be the students. And that's exactly what happened. Dressed in simple costumes, the young dancers performed tango, hip-hop, samba, and ballet. They mixed movements with voices, shouted their names, sweated, laughed, cried, and were met with ovations. At the end of the performance, Sophia stepped onto the stage. She wore a white blouse, black pants, and the silver locket around her neck. "This place belongs to you," she told the children. "Here, no one will ever have to disappear to be heard. Here, talent will never again be silenced." Applause. In the audience, Robert watched in silence, his eyes wet. For the first time, he felt whole. In the months that followed, his life underwent a renovation as profound as the warehouse's. He sold 3 of the 5 cars from his collection. Fired executives involved in quiet frauds he had inherited from his father. Shut down shell sectors of the company that existed only for speculation. He redirected funds to the cultural center, reviewed contracts, cut the excess. His former partners called him crazy. Some even laughed. Robert didn't respond to anyone. He was too busy learning how to be someone. Little by little, he stopped being Robert Harris, the magnate, and became just Robert, the guy who cleaned the floor after rehearsals, who fetched takeout meals with the volunteers, who listened more than he spoke. Sophia watched him from a distance, testing his consistency, and in time, she began to smile when he walked into the room. Across the city, Emily faced a mirror in silence. Her therapist's office was minimalist, welcoming, and free of judgment. The perfect place for someone who, for the first time, was willing to strip away all the versions she had created of herself. "I was good at performing," she confessed during one session. "I knew exactly who they expected me to be. Elegant, strong, beautiful. But when the mask fell, I had no idea who was underneath." The therapist simply took notes. "I don't have excuses," Emily continued. "Only questions, and I'm willing to look for them." It was at the end of one of those sessions that she made a decision. Not to be seen, not to restore her public image, but because something in her soul had begun to ache, the kind of discomfort that only fades when you try to do the right thing. Emily's visit to the cultural center happened on a rainy afternoon. She arrived unannounced, wearing jeans, a plain jacket, and a bare face. No cameras, no photographers, no makeup. Sophia noticed her arrival. Their eyes met. There was tension, too much history between them. Emily didn't hesitate. "I didn't come to redeem myself or to play the good girl. I came because maybe there's something in me that isn't just ego." Sophia crossed her arms. "You tried to destroy me, Emily." "I know." She took a deep breath. "I was hurt, proud, blind, and ironically, you were the only one who showed me who I really was, without even trying." Silence. "And now?" Sophia asked. "I want to help. Not with money, with work, with time. Let me serve tea to the kids, organize costumes, sweep the stage, anything." Sophia studied her for a while, then pointed to a cabinet in the corner of the room. "The costumes have been a mess since the last performance, if you want to start there." Emily nodded, moved, and for the first time in a long while, lowered her head without feeling humiliated. It was on a warm spring afternoon that Grace appeared. She was 9 years old, sharp-eyed, barefoot. She had come along with a friend who took classes. She sat in the corner, mimicking the steps in silence, with such natural ease that Sophia stopped the rehearsal to watch. "Have you danced before?" Sophia asked. "No, but my body listens fast." From the back of the room, where he was sorting papers, Robert let out a quiet laugh. "Your body listens fast? That's a new one." Grace shrugged. "It's true. When the music talks, my feet already know the way." Sophia extended her hand. "Come dance with me." Grace accepted, and within minutes she was dancing as if she had been born there, on that wooden floor, among steps and rhythms. At the end of the song, the students applauded. Robert looked at Sophia. She was already looking at him. In that little girl was a spark impossible to ignore. It wasn't just talent, it was abandonment, strength, innocence, and fury, contained in a small body with eyes too wise for her age. In the days that followed, Grace began to attend classes regularly. Sophia paid for her snacks. Robert helped with transportation. Nobody planned it, but everyone knew she was already part of the family. One night, after rehearsal, Sophia and Robert sat on the steps at the entrance of the center. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky orange and pink. "Grace reminds me of myself," Sophia said with a faint smile. "She reminds me of who I could have been." "Do you think she has a future?" "If it depends on us, she'll have a present. The future, she'll build herself." Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, for the first time, without resistance. "We're changing, Robert." "No." He smiled. "We're finally beginning for real." 2 years later, the Sophia Green Cultural Center was more than just a dance space. It was a beating heart in the middle of the city. Inside, rhythms echoed off the walls like prayers. Every step on stage was a story of resilience. Every child there was a living answer to everything they once said was impossible. Robert Harris, now with a short beard and simple clothes, was no longer recognized by suited executives, but by boys and girls who ran to him for advice, a snack, or help tying a shoelace. Sophia, meanwhile, had become a national reference. She had already declined invitations to host TV shows, direct productions in major cities, and lecture at universities. Her focus remained steady: the center's floor, the children's eyes, the next rehearsal. And between them, there was something serene, a quiet love, unhurried, that didn't need display. They shared everything: decisions, responsibilities, doubts, and silences. They spent some nights together, others apart. They didn't demand presence, They celebrated partnership. But there was someone who bound them even more deeply: Grace. The adoption happened on a rainy afternoon at the juvenile court. Sophia held Grace's hand and Robert carried the folder with the documents. The social worker said, moved, "I've never seen a child so awaited by two adults who were already in practice her parents." Grace didn't cry, but her eyes shone like beacons. "So now I can write Harris Green in my notebook?" Robert laughed. "You can, and you should." Sophia kissed her forehead. "And anything else you want to write. That name is just the beginning." They left the courthouse hand in hand, the three of them. No fireworks, no headlines. But there was a new family, stitched together by courage and choice. That same week, the Cultural Center turned 2 years old. The celebration was carefully planned: performances, photo exhibits, before and after videos, discreet tributes. Robert asked for only one thing: that the final performance be a brand new choreography, danced by Sophia and Grace. At first, Sophia resisted. She said the stage now belonged to the children. But Grace insisted with a simple argument: "I want to dance with my mom, and I want the world to see it." The choreography was rehearsed in secret for weeks. Robert watched from the sidelines, hidden in the shadows, his chest swelling with quiet joy. On the night of the event, the center's auditorium was packed. Extra chairs were added in the back. The facade, lit with warm lights, bore simple letters: Sophia Green Cultural Center. Where there is dance, there is truth. The performances began on time. Children and teenagers took the stage with energy, technique, and soul. During the intermission, videos showed the community's transformation, students' testimonials, and old footage of the ruined warehouse. At the end, the announcer called, "To close this night of rebirth, we invite to the stage Sophia Green and her daughter, Grace Harris Green." The audience rose to their feet before the first note even played. They walked in barefoot, hand in hand. Sophia in a light dress, Grace in a white and blue outfit. The music began, a modern tango blended with elements of waltz. Their steps flowed as if they shared the same body. Sophia led. Grace responded. There was sweetness, strength, and freedom in their movements. At the end, they lay side by side on the stage floor, as if to say, "We've arrived." The audience erupted in applause. Robert, backstage, drew a deep breath. It was time. When mother and daughter stepped off the stage, Robert walked in. He wore a white shirt, no tie, dark shoes. On his face, a rare brightness. He took the microphone. "Good evening." The hall immediately fell silent. "I don't usually speak in public. I prefer to act. But tonight, I need to say something that no longer fits only in my heart." Robert turned toward Sophia, who was still at the edge of the stage, holding Grace's towel. "2 years ago, I saw you again in the worst possible setting. A party built to inflate my ego. I humiliated you, challenged you, and you answered with art, with dignity, and with dance. You taught me what neither my father, nor money, nor the business world ever could: the truth." The audience listened in silence. "Since then, we've shared a mission, a project, a life. Together, we built a space where children are reborn every day, where I am reborn every day, and we built a family." Robert pulled a velvet box from his pocket. "Sophia Green, dancing with you taught me how to live. Having you by my side taught me how to love. And building all of this with you taught me how to be a man." He knelt down. "Will you marry me?" The hall exploded. Cheers, applause, muffled sobs. Sophia covered her mouth with her hand. Then slowly, she walked to him smiling. A calm smile, a steady gaze. "Yes, Robert, I will." He rose and embraced her. Grace ran to them, wrapping both in a tight hug. Minutes later, as the music played again, something unexpected happened. Robert, Sophia, and Grace returned to the dance floor. Without rehearsal, without choreography, they simply danced. He, still with stiff movements, but full of surrender. Sophia, light as always. And Grace, free, spinning between them like the perfect link. In that moment, there was no stage, no audience, only the three of them, and the certainty that when truth dances, it rebuilds what the world once tried to destroy. If this story made you believe there's still room for new beginnings, write in the comments. There's still time. That alone will say it all. And if you want more people to feel what you just felt, hit the like button and subscribe. It's your way of helping this message go even further.